Hello there, I'm Todd Weller. Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn, served by the FileMaker team here at Cross IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. Just make sure we have your email address so we can contact you. After looking at some script topics and answering one of your questions during our last few sessions, we return to layout mode today, specifically the chart object and the chart tool. When it comes to our data, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. Configuring the correct chart allows us to visualize our data and see patterns and trends more easily. We have a lot to cover in the time available, so let's get started. All right, welcome everyone. So we're looking at the different chart types that you can set up using the chart tool here in FileMaker. And there are, as you can see, 7 different chart types that are available to us. There is the column chart, bar chart, pie chart, line, area, scatter chart, and bubble chart. Obviously, we won't have time to get into all of those, but we'll try to touch on a few of them today. And the other thing to just note is that there's actually 3 different variations of the column chart and then 2 variations of the bar chart, which I didn't really get into and list out here. But again, we'll see those once we dive under the hood here and get into layout mode. Just a couple things to point out here as we go forward, and that is there are 3 tabs when we get into the chart tool as far as setting up our options. I have the tabs in quotes because they act like tabs, but they actually go down the side, so I don't know if that qualifies as a tab or not. So, but they are for setting up the chart, the styles, and the data source. Now the styles I think is pretty self-explanatory. We can go down a lot of rabbit holes there as far as the number of things that you can change and tweak as far as fonts and sizes and things of that nature and colors. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but we won't spend a lot of time there because it's more about, you can spend as much time there as you want. But specifically on the chart tab, what we want to look at today, that is the area where we're going to be able to set up, both the chart title and the type of chart, which we had just talked about previously. And then also that's where we set up our x-axis and our y-axis data is on that first tab. And then on the third tab, which is equally important, that is the data source tab, and that's where you select, okay, where is the data coming from that's going to be displayed in our chart. And currently there are 3 options there. There is the current found set, the current record or delimited data, and then also related records. So we're going to look at a few different examples of each of those. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a bar chart here, looking at sales history. I have 10,000 records that have been pulled over, imaginary data, of course, some products that have been sold so that we can see, okay, exactly how many of these products have been sold. So we'll drop into a layout mode here. Move that over so you can see the shortcut keys that I'm using, and then just shrink my window just a little bit so that everything fits on the screen here. All right, so we're in layout mode. As you can see here from the icon, and the tooltip will pop up here momentarily, this is the chart tool. So if we just select that, come down here, and we drag it on, and it immediately pulls up the chart setup dialog. And these here are the 3 tabs that I talked about. Here you can see the chart. Here as we get into the styles, and here is where we get into the data source tab. Now this one here, as you can see, it's always going to default to the current found set, and so that's where we're going to go ahead and leave it. Also, because of what we're looking at, we do want to look at for a summarized group of records, rather than the individual record data. So we're going to go ahead and leave that alone, and that allows us to come back here now to the chart. Like I said, this here is where you can set the chart title. Okay, so we'll just throw a name in there, and this is where you can select the type. And like I said, this here is where you have the 3 different column types, where you've got column, stack column, positive, negative column, bar, stack bar, and then the other 5 ones just have these single options for those. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and just leave it as the column chart. And this here is where we get in now to our setting up of our x-axis and our y-axis. So we're going to start here. These are going to be the product numbers, and then we go in here and select our data. And so we want to, here you can either specify a field or specify a calculation. Because we are using from the found set, we should be able to just go here to our field list, select the product number. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and make that model number so everything lines up. And then come down here to our y-axis. And again, we'll just go ahead and give it a title. And then now we can select. And again, we'll go with the field. And this one here is a field that I've already set up, is that I've got a summary field. I know that's a summary field only because of my naming convention, but I know that this is the count of items. So we can go ahead and use that. And you can see it's giving us a little bit of a preview here, which doesn't really look right, but we're going to go ahead and say done anyway. And then, as noted, I didn't really do anything with the formatting. I just kind of threw it on the layout. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean that up a little bit. Go ahead and change my anchor point so that it fills the entire space. Go ahead and save that, and now I can drop back into browse mode. All right, and that is not helpful at all. Okay, now I did that on purpose so I could show you, because this is one of the more common errors that you'll run into. If you want to get back into the setup area, you just double click on your chart and it brings that window up. Okay, when we set up our data source, because there's I think 15 items that we're recording the sales of, but we're looking at summarized groups of records. Okay. But we're looking at here 10,000 records that are unsorted. So let's go ahead and apply a sort. And we want to sort by the model number. So that's remembered from last time when I was testing. So I can just go ahead and now I can do my sort. And so now I've got a chart that means a little bit more, obviously, because it's taking care of all of that. I'm able to see what the numbers are for the different items sold. So everything is looking good. All right, so let's take a look a little bit more at some of the things that we're able to do. Like I said, we weren't going to spend a lot of time on this middle tab as far as the styles, but just so you know what those options are. You have some options to do some solids or shading, whether it has more of a 3D appearance or whether it's flat. You can also have, unfortunately, you're unable to pick specific colors. However, you do have a number of different palettes that you're able to choose from, depending on the theme of the file that you're adding your chart to. Do some things with the grid lines, what the legend looks like. And then down here, you can select the font, and you'll notice here that it has a relative text size, and that is because the chart text is set to automatic. Now, if you really wanted to get into the minutia of the chart, you can select custom, and then you have total control over the font and size for the title, the legend, all the data points, X and Y axis. But for the sake of this, just because we don't want to lose too much time dealing with all of that stuff, which of course is important to make it look nice when you're done, we're just going to go ahead and leave it on automatic and not play around with that too much. One other thing that I will point out here is that just because of the width of the layout, everything seems to fit. But one of the things that you are able to do, which is nice, is you can actually change the label of the angle. So if I do that, you can see it kind of just turns it on its side. So if you've got a very densely packed chart that doesn't have a lot of real estate, then you can go ahead and turn those on the side and make things a little bit more readable for your users. So let's go ahead and save that. Drop back into browse mode, and you can see what that change looks like. Now, obviously, we need to also pay attention to a couple things here on this chart. As you'll notice that it looks like this item didn't sell very many, and this RP82 item sold quite a few. But you'll notice as we go over here to the numbers sold, it's set relatively to the amount of data that's in the chart. Which again, that's something that you can control. So if we go back here to our chart tab, I'll switch over here to our y-axis, you see that we do have the ability to set a minimum. So if I were to set that to, okay, I want to see everything relative to 0 and make that change, save it, back into browse mode, you can see now we're going from 0 up to the maximum number of sold across those 15 items or however many there are. So the differences between the numbers sold of each item is not quite as obvious as it was because of it going from 0. So something to, certainly to consider as you're setting up your own charts, as to make sure it's properly configured so you're pointing out the important information and not forcing someone to draw a possible improper conclusion. Okay, so that is the bar chart. Now another one that we're able to do here is a pie chart, which is another very common chart. And so again, we'll just go ahead and draw another chart object on here. Now this one, because we're dealing with the same data, I'm going to go ahead and leave it current found set. It already knows that we're sorted on the layout, so model number is a good way to sort. Come back here to the chart. And you'll notice we've got an x-axis, we've got a y-axis, but here when I switch to pie chart, it changes, and now I just have category labels, and then I have the slice of the data, which makes sense because obviously pie chart is very different. So again, we can go ahead and specify our model number there. Our slice data is the summary field once again. Okay, and as like I said, we're actually getting a nice little preview here of what's going on. We can show the legend, which can certainly be helpful if you want to include that information there. We could also go ahead and show some values on the pie chart, which is nice. Which is we've got the legend, or the model number there, and then we can choose whether we want to show percentages or some type of the actual value as far as the number. So you can play around with that as to whatever makes sense for your chart. So if I go ahead and say done there, and again just resize that just a little bit. Fix our anchors. Save it, and we go into browse mode, and then you can see we have a nice chart, pie chart now of our sales history, so we can see how each product is performing. All right, so that is using the current found set and summarizing the data across that found set, a couple different examples. But of course, there's still some more things that we're able to do with our chart objects, and so this is, of course, for anybody that's joined us regularly, I have a slight fascination with roller coasters, so I thought we'd use some of my roller coaster data here. All right, and this is one, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at, I want to plot roller coasters by height and speed, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a different type of chart object. So we'll just go ahead again, drag that on here, and we're going to start. Instead of using the current found set, we're actually going to use, we're going to stay with the current found set. However, instead of using the summarized records or summarized groups of records, if I could talk today, we're actually going to use individual record data, just so you can see what that difference is. So that would be similar when it was unsorted, but this one here is something we want to pay attention to, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to use what's called a scatter chart, just so you can see what's going on here. And what we're doing is we're actually plotting roller coasters by height and speed. So if I put the height on the x-axis, I'm going to put the speed here. I'll go ahead and give it a title. Okay, and then our x-axis data, again, is going to be a field name, so we can just come down here and select the height. And the speed. All right. So now this one here, it's probably going to be helpful to actually show some of our scale lines. So we're going to go ahead and make that. Let's see. Very good. So we're not going to worry about showing the data points on the chart. Let's see. I'm missing something here. Let me just... There we go. This is the one thing that's on the styles that I'm going to go ahead and just so you can see the, the grid lines, so how things line up. So I go ahead and click done. Again, just a little bit of housekeeping here to get that centered, anchor it. And so now you can see a scatter chart where we've got all of the roller coasters that I've actually have ridden over my lifetime, plotted by height and speed. And then you can see as you get higher, you would expect the roller coasters to get faster, and that's kind of what the data plays out. So a rather fun example as far as a use case for the scatter chart, but something certainly to keep in mind in your own applications. All right, so that is using the found set but having the non-summarized data. So let's go ahead, and we've got another roller coaster example, except this here is we're going to be looking at the amusement parks. And I wanted to pull up an example of something that we would do for the related data, because I have to admit that's something that I do not use very often, but I thought it would be good to go ahead and show what this is. So I've already got a little bit of the layout already set up here, where we've got the name of the amusement park and then a list of the coasters that have either currently are or have been at that amusement park. And we're just going to look at the couple different examples, breakdown of those roller coasters. Okay, so first one is, let's go ahead and we'll put that chart object on there. Come down here to our data source, and this one here is that instead of, we're going to be selecting related records, and then it asks us for the related table that we're going to pull from, similar to how a portal works. So we go ahead and select that, and we can specify whether we want to have those records sorted. All right, and since usually the higher a roller coaster is, the better it is, we're just going to go ahead and sort it by height, but we're going to sort it in descending order. All right, and now we can come back to the chart and go ahead and leave it as a column. And I'm not going to worry about a title for that because that'll be somewhat self-explanatory. Right fields. Oops, if I could type today. Okay, and then let's go ahead and clean that up, anchor it. Now when I switch to browse mode, and what you're seeing here is I switch through the different amusement parks that are located here in the state of Pennsylvania. We have now a specific chart that is showing me the heights of each roller coaster in descending order that appear at each of those parks. All right. So that is one use of that. You can also go ahead and do it with a chart, or a pie chart rather. So I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to edit this one. And that's one of those things. With the chart, you're able to throw a chart on there and just kind of play around with it and see, how does it look, what makes the most sense, those kinds of things. And so this one here, what we're going to do is that instead of sorting by height, we're actually going to go ahead and sort by the type. Okay. And then I'm going to come back here, switch this to a pie chart. And then we just have to make a couple changes here. That is the again, because I know what my save that. And actually, let's go ahead and show the legend for this one. All right, and now what we're doing, we're looking at that same group of data, made a couple quick changes to switch it. And so instead of viewing them by height, I'm able to see, okay, how many amusement or how many coasters at that park are steel roller coasters and how many are wooden. Of course, and then as I go through them, I'm able to see, the different breakdowns, going park to park. So that is related record data and what you're able to do with that. A couple quick examples. All right, so now we get to delimited data, okay? And this one is interesting. It gives you a lot of flexibility, actually, because whatever is in a return separated list is what is going to go ahead and show up on the chart, okay? So what does that look like? Well, let's go into browse mode, add our chart. Okay, again, want to go ahead and start with the data source. So if I just go ahead in here and select current record, you'll notice because we're dealing with a single record, obviously the sort order there is not going to be of any consideration because it's just a single record. All right, and then we have here is our x-axis, y-axis. Again, we're dealing with a column. But here, what we're able to do is for the data, we're going to specify a calculation, and I'm just going to put in a return separated list. So we'll just put in some fruit names. I think that's right. There we go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got 5 options there. Come down here to our data, and if I were to do the same thing, except now I just go ahead and put in some numbers. We got the same number of items there. And so now when I say done, again, just to clean this up just a tad. And you can see it has created a chart based off of that delimited data, okay? So that would work, whether it's a bar chart, pie chart, doesn't really matter. In fact, one of the examples here, which is a chart that we have not looked at, if I looked at a stacked column, okay, and so what we want to do here obviously is we would add a second series, and Okay, and you can see we're kind of where it's at the first Y series, the second Y series, and it's just stacking those on because I have the same number of values in each of those. And so obviously, setting up a chart this way, by actually going in and typing in data, I mean, it works, but it doesn't really work, if you know what I mean. I mean, that's not the way you want to have some live dynamic system displaying charts, is doing it that way. But what you are able to do is either through the use of calculations or scripts, anything that you're able to pull up that then gives you a return separated list, then you're able to now display on the chart. Okay, and this is a great use case for for execute SQL. You're able to use that as your data sources, or use a script, runs through things and puts things in either a global field or a global variable, or even the record itself, because again, we're looking at a single record, that as long as that information is in a return separated list, then we know that's going to work for us. So let's go ahead and let's do an example of that. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use execute SQL to do a query. But the way I like to use SQL is I always do something where I start with the data viewer. So we're just going to dive a little bit deeper under the hood here. I'm going to go ahead and add a new value and go ahead and let's see. All right. Select. I'm on the spot here, and now I can't think of what query I want to. Let's cancel that. All right, I need to go review my table so I know what I'm looking at here. Right. So let's try this one. Okay, so oops. Sorry, folks, I should have obviously had this all prepped. So I could have just been able to copy and paste it in. So bear with me as I type and debug my calculation. And why is this not working? Okay, so it didn't like the greater than or equal. Okay. Okay, so that's a somewhat reasonable list. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and copy that. Dismiss that, get it back in here to our chart setup. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and delete that one so I get a fresh start here. Throw that on. All right, so there is a chart that was done using execute SQL, and again, because that returns a return separated list, we're able to use that delimited data, and now we are able to add charts to our layout kind of out of context, if you will, because that's one of the nice things that execute SQL does, or some kind of scripted operation you could have fire off and run on server that just returns separated list of results, so that you get to see the information there. So again, sorry for the delay on that, but that's what happens when you do things live. So hopefully you found that helpful. With that, let's go ahead and see if we have any questions. All right, so, good question. Which charts do you use most often? I would say probably the charts that I use most often would be probably the bar chart or the pie chart. It's fun to work with the other charts, of course. And then as far as the setup goes, that would be usually those examples where we were looking at summarized data in the found set, or something that I've compiled in a delimited list from other sources to kind of compile the information and put it together, depending on what I'm preparing to demo and all of that kind of stuff. All right, so also got a second question here. What's the best way to learn the charting? Honestly, the best way is to just get in there and start building charts and playing around with all of the different things that you're able to change, in the styles and the different types of charts, and adding data series. That's really the best way. Obviously, start with a file that it doesn't matter if you mess anything up. So you want to have either get some demo data or something that you're able to export from a live system to kind of play with in a standalone file. But just working with it is probably the best way. And are there any limitations? I would have to say, in all honesty, there are limitations, because you do see, not every chart type is, represented. I can't remember the name of the chart type, but I know there's one where you see a trend line on top of data that's in a bar chart. So you can kind of say, okay, did we reach our target? That's not something that's, can be done with the existing chart. So there are some limitations that you would potentially have to work around. But hopefully you had enough of a picture to see that there is quite a bit of capability there with the charts that we do have that come with FileMaker right out of the box. So let's see, do we have any other questions? All right, I don't see any, so let's move on to some upcoming events. First, the next meeting of FM Berg, the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group, takes place on Wednesday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. That's after a change this month. We are returning to our regular first Wednesday of the month meeting schedule. This is also a hybrid meeting. That means you'll have the option to attend in person or join us remotely. For details and to RSVP, please visit www.crossit.com/fmberg. Also at noon on Wednesday, November 16th, we will serve our next Lunch and Learn. As we head into the fall season, we are still in the planning stages, so please stay tuned and we'll announce our next topic in a couple of weeks. All right, so thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. If you liked what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, we do ask that you do. You can also hit the bell there and get notified anytime we go live. All right, now some of the content that's presented as part of our Lunch and Learn sessions are the results of your questions. So if you have a suggestion for a future topic or if a specific FileMaker problem has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be the featured topic of a future Lunch and Learn. From all of us at CrossIT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.